Welcome to another episode of the Eric and Mark Show. Playground rules and antics, that nasty little phenomenon that rears its head in organizations and keeps them from their potential. Before we press on with today's episode, I feel like we need to take a tactical step backwards to jump ahead of the curve of what some of our listeners are probably thinking. Here are two things that I want to make absolutely clear to our listeners that we are not saying. The first thing we're not saying is that if you have a dominant personality within your organization, that you're a bully, because that's just absurd. What we are asking you to reflect on is, why are you dominant? Are you dominant because you've taken the time to get good at what you do? Or are you dominant because you have a relationship with management and it is on that merit through which you receive opportunities? The second thing we are not saying is that organizations that do not consider everybody for all positions are playground bullies, because that too is absurd. In other words, if the organization you work for has an opening for an engineer and you're not an engineer, you shouldn't expect to be considered, nor have the right to complain if you're not considered. What we are saying, though, and bringing it back to the playground rules and antics phenomenon, is if your organization only rewards a select group of individuals within your organization with all the opportunities that exist, your organization is running like a playground. And that is what we aim to point out here and help you fix, if you're interested.
So, in regards to the dominant person, a few things come to mind, Eric. There's different ways that people demonstrate dominance or leadership, and as you mentioned, dominance is not necessarily a bad thing. What ends up happening is sometimes they just are, maybe they're more extroverted, maybe they're better public speakers, or perhaps even maybe they're just more confident as public speakers. They speak more loudly. Maybe they've just been with that organization longer, and that makes them more confident than the new guy. Maybe the new guy knows more about the subject matter, but the guy who's been there longer feels like he can be dominant, not in a bad way, but just because he's like, hey, I've been here for a while, and you may know this specific elements of this profession better overall, but I've been with this company longer, so I know the inner workings of the company. Question that comes to mind, when you talk about the organization, an organization that only rewards a specific group, can you please give us an example of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, if you take it back to the actual playground, you'll see that, for example, the playground executive and their clique is going to be a select group of individuals that have been together for a long time, and they enjoy each other's personality. So it's not really a matter of character. In other words, it's not a matter of who has the most solid set of the best moral compass, the most solid set of standards. It's about what personalities they enjoy being with and hanging around. And so that's normally who's going to be in your clique. And so it doesn't matter if an outsider, a new kid comes to school who has character, who has work ethic, who is the first in the field, the last to leave. It doesn't matter how good that person gets. They're always going to be picked last, because on the playground it's a matter of personality and not a matter of character. If you take it to the workforce, you're going to have the same thing. People of like personalities that have been there a while are going to gravitate towards each other. And the new hire, which may have outstanding character, maybe it's because the executive and the clique may feel like they're being judged by somebody who is maybe seemingly trying to impose their good character on them, and so they're left out. So when you find yourself in an organizational setting that all the opportunities for promotion or opportunities for better off days or opportunities for the better assignments and assignments that people want, they're going to go to the people that are in line with the personality that are held by the members of the clique or by the executives themselves.
Absolutely. Now, one thing that kind of comes to mind, I don't know if this is kind of like a gray area or it kind of falls in between the people who have merit versus the people that have personality. now we always say, you know, there are always exceptions, but I'm wondering, in a sense, if part of merit makes up, or part of personality makes up merit. So, for example, let's say on a team, I remember I was watching the Blackhawks last night, and the Chicago Blackhawks, and they won their game against San Jose. They were talking about one guy in the team. They were saying, you know what, he's a really good team guy and that kind of thing. He's got to be the funniest guy I've ever met. He keeps the atmosphere loose and that type of thing. Now this guy they were talking about might end up being arguably not one of the players. In fact, you might say that under certain circumstances, you know, he probably isn't even on the level of, like, let's say, the modern day NHL player, the National Hockey League player. He's kind of like, he falls short a little bit in terms of his overall output. But the thing is, the teams that he's on, specifically the Blackhawks, they say, oh, he's a really good team guy. He's really good with the younger guys. He's good to have around. Now, he's not necessarily even training them. He's more just kind of like approachable and like, oh, taking the new guys out to dinner or whatever, and kind of showing them around. So there's some merit in that, but I think that a lot of his merit really just comes from his personality more than it comes from his actual ability to play hockey. I'm interested in your thoughts on that.
Well, sports franchises seem to have it right. It'd be nice if the other adult organizations would follow suit. So in a sports team, you're going to have people that are qualified, let's say, to be a forward, are going to get the position not because of their personality, but because they can actually do the job. When it gets to an adult organization, especially the social sciences, it's not really a matter of can you do the job as much as are you liked. So it becomes almost purely the important factor there is the personality and not how good you are doing something. And so that's where the issue comes in, where the playground rules are going to allow the personality to prevail over their character or actual ability to do a job. So, you know, in sports, you can't fake being a good forward. You know, you either are or you aren't. And if you aren't, you're probably not even going to be drafted.
But back to my question, though, is there a portion of, and I understand what you're saying, I actually agree with it, but is there an aspect of personality that actually lends itself to merits? Like part of the qualifications of being a good team player are more, or in a specific role, like a role player, is that, you know, more than being a great hockey player, basketball player, it, you know, you might be just a really good guy to have around because you kind of keep things loose, and like I said, you have other redeeming qualities. But again, those are more important or prominent than your actual ability to play hockey or basketball. Could that be considered? In other words, can a part of personality actually be considered merit for a position or considered a qualification for a position?
I think personality allows somebody to fake it. And that's, again, where the problem ensues. Character, I guess, makes you like the easygoing kind of person, the person that's approachable, the person that is cohesive, the person that is going to be driven to build team unity. Some people may call that a personality, but I think a personality is a product of someone's character. So I would say that character should be more of the driving force of who is going to be allowed to be the team leader versus someone's cool personality and ability to tell jokes.
Oh, absolutely. As far as leadership, undoubtedly. But I'm just wondering, as far as being a member of a team, if somebody can go ahead with a certain type of personality, if they deserve to be on that team because their personality outshines their merit, perhaps, or
well, you know, what makes people deserve to be on a team is if they can do the job.
Fair enough.
So again, that's where like in athletics, you can't really make a decision based on personality because you're not going to allow your brother to be the goalie of your team just because he's your brother. if he's not a goalie.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because I think I've noticed that with this guy who's played for the Blackhawks is that I would say, just in my opinion, I never played hockey professionally, but I did play in college and several levels before that. It kind of made me wonder. It's kind of like I could have thought of better hockey players than him to be in that position. And I think that he was just, the quote-unquote likable team guy. And I think that maybe there was a part of them that chose him because he was popular with the players, popular with the coaches, popular with the fans. Now there's merit because he's a hard worker and that kind of thing. But usually the hockey game will have a professional hockey game will have 12 forwards, 4 lines of 3 each. And I would say that for their 12th forward, so to speak, kind of like the 6th man in basketball, they could have found a better hockey player than him without a doubt. But I think that he was chosen for the team, like I said, because he's a good team guy, he has a good personality, and I think that one thing that's very important that they talk about within teams is chemistry. So maybe there was a guy who was more talented or just a better basketball player or a hockey player in general, but this guy specifically seemed to fit in better with the team chemistry, and because he fit in better with the team chemistry, they chose the player who was not as good of a hockey player overall. Is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, well, even like the Chicago Bulls, if you look at Dennis Rodman, he had a personality that absolutely frustrated the opponent's offense.
Yep.
But that's not why Phil Jackson chose him. Phil Jackson, if I had to guess why he chose him, was because of his work ethic and his character. And
Absolutely.
I think kind of allowed his little bit exaggerated personality because of his work ethic and his character. But he was not chosen because of his personality. Now, his personality ended up being a feature that kind of made him the player he was and kind of helped him be effective because, again, he was a frustration element. But he was picked for that position because of character and work ethic and because of his ability to do the job, not because he was likable.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, it's interesting on those tokens. It kind of makes you wonder, there's no 2 resumes with an employer that are going to be the same. When they're looking at resumes, that they're going to say, oh, this guy has exactly the same qualifications the other guy does. But if they're put in the same pool, and let's say they say, hey, you know what? These guys are almost exactly, these two people are almost have almost exactly the same qualifications, but in a range of qualifications, their candidacy of each one of them is pretty much just as strong. It's almost like they need a tiebreaker of some kind. Maybe the tiebreaker could be a colorful personality. You know what? The first guy has as many qualifications as the second guy, but the first guy has a little bit more of a colorful personality. Maybe he's a little bit more, maybe he's a little bit more of, he's less shy, or he's more extroverted. He's more opinionated. Again, so those things can seem like merit, but it's like if you have 2 people that seem like they're more or less equally qualified, at some point you think that the tipping point might be something about their personality that makes them, in an interview process, might make an employer choose one over the other. So there's got to be a tiebreaker somewhere, right?
Well, yeah, personality can absolutely be a tiebreaker, but the problem that I see in the playground rules, it is not the tiebreaker, it is the deciding factor.
Absolutely. Yep. And I think that's the key point. You think you just nailed it right there. And, so that's one of those things that we're up against when we face. It's definitely a challenge. It's definitely a challenge. And, as we've talked about in some of our other recorded shows, that we experience these challenges in different parts of life, It's this phenomenon in different parts of life, and it's something that we go back to and we talk about. Where would you say that this plays a role in a relationship? So let's talk about dominant roles or dominant personalities, like in relationships, personal relationships, or friendships. So does that translate that maybe one person would be more dominant or a personality type, and then another person would be more submissive, and they could have still a healthy balance, or does that end up being sort of like does that end up being sort of more of a kind of a power play of some kind, implicitly? Like, how would you define dominant personalities in relationships, and and then the personalities that are maybe not as dominant, or maybe the opposite of dominant in this case would be submissive, perhaps? So, what are your thoughts on that in personal relationships and friendships?
Well, the role that I see personality having in relationships, especially relationships of significant others, is that a big mistake people make is similar to the mistake that corporations make, where a person may select their mate based on the person's personality. You know, there's an allure to the rock star, there's an allure to the poet, and so you're making a decision on who you're going to spend a portion of your life with based on how cool they are and not on their character, on what they have to offer the relationship. Are they going to value you? Are they going to support you? Are they going to invest in your dreams? Not only expect you to invest in theirs. So I think personality plays more of a factor as far as whether or not a relationship is going to work and is going to be beneficial to somebody, on being the main factor that's looked at, and kind of the person is lulled into liking somebody because of the personality, and almost not realizing that character is a lot more important.
Absolutely. Well, I think it's kind of like, let's say that two people are going on a date, right? And and so let's take a look at that scenario. So a lot of times people are attracted to each other because of physical beauty. They like a certain color of hair or color of eyes or body type or any number of things. But then you get into some other things like charm, and maybe a lady will go ahead and say that she went on a date with a guy, and even if he wasn't the best looking guy or whatever, she felt like she was laughing the entire date and she was having a great time, and that kind of thing. Now, just because he can make her laugh doesn't mean that he's a character guy, though. That's the difference between the personality and the characters you're referring to. Maybe his character is kind of flimsy, or his moral compass isn't very high, or he's not that hard of a work, or any number of things. But he is just able to lure her in with his charm, and she ends up realizing it later. So that works really well as a first impression, and I think that a lot of times gets people in the door as far as dates. It will get them a second date, or it'll even. They could probably keep that up long enough for for the beginnings of a relationship. But look at how that translates to an interview process. Arguably, like the first interview that you go to for a job is almost like a first date, right? So if you go ahead and you do that, then it's like you're asked back for a second date and a third date, and they may not get a chance to really know your character until they actually employ you and give you that probationary period. What are your thoughts about that, as far as the charm that people have, and how that applies to personal relationships, and also employment opportunities, professional environment, but it doesn't necessarily correlate to character? How do people maybe maneuver that, either intentionally or unintentionally? What's your observation on that?
Well, just to be pointed out in other conversations, a big part of what molds people's interrelations is the playground. And people aren't really taught to look at character. They're taught to value personality. Nobody wants to hang around a dull person, someone who can't take a joke or can't make a joke. And so you're quickly shunned from any group if you don't have those two basic abilities. And so from the playground on, we're pretty much taught or conditioned to value personality over character. We don't even realize that character exists, or even what character is. And so then that permeates into the professional world, where people are able to dupe their way into positions because they have a cool personality. And because the leaders came from the same background of at one point in their life being on the playground, they make their decisions in a similar fashion.
Absolutely. And I think that's sometimes that people are given, the false pretense of merit based on charm or even physical beauty. Like, how many times have you heard, people say, "Oh, wow, well, at least if so and so was elected, we'd have a really good looking president." You know what I'm saying? I mean, all due respect to the presidents we have in the past, but we've had several of them, including John F. Kennedy and everything, who definitely had his own merit, arguably, regardless of anybody's political affiliations. But pretty much everyone across the board seemed to think that he was a really good-looking guy. And it's like, oh, that's the kind of face I'd like to look at for the next 4 years if he gets elected and that type of thing. But that's not necessarily saying anything about his qualifications to do it, and I think that speaks to his overall presentation, his charm, the way that he dresses, the way that he speaks, and that kind of thing. But at the same time, again, it comes back to, until he spends some time in office, whether that was JFK or somebody else, we don't really get to know their character entirely until we actually see them perform. And then by that point, well, maybe we might end up being stuck with them for a number of years more than we want to, because you don't just fire a president because you don't like them anymore, right? You're stuck with them for a while.
Yeah, well, it seems like in those scenarios, and even in the corporate scenarios, we give people an easy out. As far as when we ask them character-based questions, we allow them to finesse their way out of it by telling a smooth joke or making a smooth reference, which immediately takes the attention off of character. So not saying he lacks character, I'm not even talking about him right now, but just in general, people are so smooth, especially people that have a lot of personality, to quickly deter from any character-based questions into making a smooth reference, and then it almost automatically gravitates back towards their personality.
Absolutely. And and that's what I was saying too, is that I brought up the example of JFK, like, for example, again, regardless of anyone's political affiliations, it's mutually exclusive. Now, just because he was considered to be a good-looking man, and at the same time that he was very charming, doesn't mean that his character underneath it all wasn't good as well. In fact, many people would argue that he was a great president and with great character and everything like that. But the two are mutually exclusive. Someone can still be charming and good-looking and that kind of thing, but they can have character as well. But it shouldn't be their charm and their good looks that gets them in the door. It should be the merit and the character, as you alluded to.
And then it can even be dissected further. Like, obviously, if you are looking at a sales position, you may have a little bit the scales tipped more in the favor of someone with personality versus character. And obviously you don't want somebody who's going to rip the company off, and that directly speaks to their character. But you do want somebody who is a friendly face, who can be quickly liked, and that's normally because people are not trained to look for and value character. They wouldn't recognize it even if they saw it.
Absolutely.
So, in certain functions within a corporation, I can see how someone's personality may be what stands out. But still, at the end of the day, when companies make those kind of choices, those are the kind of people that sometimes will end up maybe mishandling company funds or mishandling relationships for their own benefit instead of for the company's, So at the end of the day, character does matter. But it is somehow, because of playground dynamics in an adult organization, somehow is diluted into being a non-factor.
Absolutely. It's kind of funny when I was talking about being louder or more prominent or, in regards to dominance, all of a sudden I heard some thunder going, some loud thunder in the background, kind of like, oh wow, was that a rod of God moment type of thing? So yeah, Anyway, it was a little bit of comic relief. Is that we were talking about dominance and a character and power and being loud and that kind of thing, and then here I am listening to this thunder. So I had a moment there, but yeah, thunderstorms where I'm at. So that's good for me today, man. What else is on your mind?
That's it. That was the topic of the day. Just hoping to slowly but surely point out that a lot of the ways of adult organizations are very playground in nature, and that is hurting the bottom line. It's hurting the quality of people that are going to be willing to stay under that format. And hopefully a wake-up call for companies who are the gatekeepers to make sure that they don't chase good people away because they are fixated on personalities and not on legitimate interests in bringing value to your company, which is solely about character.